David Brewster here with a new episode of 3 for All. This is 3 Roy Clark licks from 1964, and it was last year when I put together the Jerry Reed Chordplay episode, and that lesson just exploded on my channel. I think it has like 78,000 views or something. Tons of comments, tons of requests poured in, and in those requests I noticed requests for Roy Clark, and that made me really happy. I was like, yeah, let's go there. And I had to make it through Christmas and the New Year and everything, so I kind of had this on the back burner. But now we're going to look at this legendary, late great guitarist. And Roy's career actually started in 1947, which is unbelievable. And in the 70s, he actually co-hosted or guest hosted The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. When Johnny was absent, sometimes Roy would kind of fill in. But then most people would remember Roy from Hee-Haw. And Hee-Haw ran from 1969 until 1993, like 25 seasons or whatever. And at their height, like the most popular era, they were reaching 30 million people in their homes. And that's a lot of people to notice Roy's talent and ability. He was a great guitarist, but he could play really anything with strings. He played, banjo and mandolin and fiddle and guitar, obviously. Great player and totally overlooked, even though he was definitely a legendary guitarist. So in Roy's career, he actually released 37 studio albums, 8 live albums, 68 singles. 9 of those songs were in the top 10, and he did have one, #1 hit, like in the country charts. I think it was called "Come Live With Me." That was in 1973. But most people, think of Roy Clark as a television, personality, which he definitely was. He was, obviously on Hee-Haw, guest hosted The Tonight Show. But he was also on Sesame Street, The Muppet Show, The Flip Wilson Show, a whole bunch of television shows. Definitely a legendary, guitarist and musician in the studio recording, but then also a legendary guitarist and musician on TV too. So the licks in this episode came from a TV appearance featuring Roy from 1964, and he was on the Jimmy Dean Show. And for some of the viewers out there, if you're too young, you might just think of Jimmy Dean as the maker of microwave breakfast sandwiches, but definitely Jimmy Dean was a legendary TV personality and country musician, and Roy was, kind of a guest on his show. And this is really interesting. I kind of chose these licks because we haven't really looked at anything like this before. There's so much quirkiness and personality, in Roy's style. It's really hard to kind of cop his style because he had these weird, quirky things that he would do, strange slides and goofy licks and funny sounding things on top of all the intense and serious things that he would play. And such an interesting guitarist, obviously a country musician, but also, well versed in classical, flamenco, jazz, and blues. So anyway, get ready, because here we go. Alright, the first lick's this funky slip and slide phrase, and as soon as I saw it, I thought, yeah, we're going to totally have to break that down. Like this. One more time. It's this weird, like funky, plucky, kind of phrase, and it's moving between A7 and D7, like a 1-4. And he slides off this A note in the beginning there, and then slowly you're doing. Right, and that's the A section right there. So do that slide off the E note, or off the A note on the low E string rather. And then you're going to slide G sharp to A right there. And then 2 percussive, hits right there, or plucks. And then you're going to slide this B into C sharp. And then 2 more percussive, hits. And then a pull off there, F sharp to E. And you're doing that kind of back and forth, the slide and then the pull off. That's an interesting little phrase right there. And it's got that plucky, clucky kind of sound like that. And then it moves to D, right? Or D7, and you're doing a similar thing, but right here. And that's tricky because it's the D, and then you're going to slide that E to F sharp, and then you're going to pull off B to A on the high E. So it's definitely mimicking what we did in A, only now we're in D. So it's this spastic, funky, clucky, plucky, phrase, but it's really cool. Roy definitely had so much personality when he'd play these erratic and kind of spastic, quirky licks, and that's a great example of that. When you hear it and see it, it's like, what in the world is going on there? And you can't help but just sit down and figure out stuff like that, like this. Now, speaking of spastic and erratic things, here's a funny slide idea, and as soon as I saw it, I thought, yeah, we're going to have to hit that too, because I remember seeing Roy playing things like this. And definitely he would play very serious and focused things on guitar, but then sometimes he'd turn around and play something silly and goofy sounding like this. Something like that. And he's basically doing chord hits and this crazy weird slide and more chord hits, and then eventually he starts doing that muted like tapping slide thing. So it's basically C major as far as the first chord. Occasionally he does grab that E right there too, like a C over E. I think I failed to play it that way during my demonstration, but he's basically doing that. Think C major, and then it's G7 right there. Right? So he's going from here to here, and when he does that change, that's where he does that crazy slide on the low E string, and he's moving between this G and A, and it's super spastic and kind of nervous sounding, like that. And then you're basically just doing that back and forth, that C to G7, and then G7 back to C. And then do it again. And then right there, it's actually D7 now to G. And then that's where he starts doing this. And you're literally just kind of tapping like the 15th fret. I'm kind of hitting like the low E and the A. I think that's also what he was doing. And then you're just literally percussive sliding with your fret hand. So you're not really tapping or fretting anything specific. You're just kind of smacking your guitar. Something like that. Okay, next up's a busy little lick, and I'm going to nickname this the Kentucky Fried Shred Lick, like this. And then you do it again. So it's basically, you're descending here, that C, B, and A. It's actually a great workout. He wasn't using his pinky finger. He was doing it like that. And you could definitely play it that way, but then also try it with your pinky too. Don't shy away from using that pinky. And then he starts doing like kind of chromatic thing, that G, G sharp, A, G sharp to G. And then do it again. Slides like that D to E back to D, and then that A to B back to A, and then that G, you're kind of picking that, and you're kind of setting that up at the end to start the whole thing over like this. Okay, here's a bonus lick from this footage, and this is appropriate. It's a bluesy ending, and we're at the end of the lesson here, so this is a perfect end, like this. One more time. And it's in C right there. So he's basically starting with this E note slid to G, and you're kind of climbing up. Like that. And when you get to the top up there, you're going to bend that D up to E. And then do a similar bend on the B string. Bend this A up to B. And then end on this E to C right there. And then right there, you're going to hit these chords. That's like a B flat 6 sus2. Move that up a half step, now it's a B6 sus2. And then move up another half step, and now it's a C6 sus2. And it totally gives it that jazzy flavor. Right? You know, something like that. Alright, that's going to wrap this episode of 3 for All with 3 Roy Clark licks from 1964. And like I mentioned at the beginning, I was really happy to see requests, for Roy Clark, because it seems like, especially after he's passed away and he's no longer on television, every week, I wondered, like, are people going to remember, him? And when I saw those requests, I was like, yes, and it was connected with the Jerry Reed lesson. Of course, Jerry Reed used to pop up on TV a lot too. And there's just something about that, And there's lots of very famous guitarists that kind of entered, late night talk show, appearances, talk show, like daytime talk shows and stuff like that, variety shows and stuff. And definitely, Johnny Carson, David Letterman and shows like that, Saturday Night Live, of course, the legendary Hee-Haw, obviously. But there's a lot of programs like that. I used to love watching Arsenio Hall's show and, Conan O'Brien and some different people. And you just never knew, like, is somebody going to be sitting in with the band? Who's going to be the musical guest, and definitely with, shows like Hee-Haw, it was random. And I think a lot of that stuff was just improvised. And they were like, all right, hit it. And they just did it. And they played it or they sang it or whatever. Very little, preparation and stuff. And you can tell it seemed very kind of off the cuff and random. But definitely Roy alongside Buck Owens, every week they were jamming and singing and smiling and laughing and everything. And definitely shows like that I think are missed in today's world. There's all this reality TV. And it's like, Hee-Haw was kind of like the original reality TV show. I guess like redneck reality. But anyway, definitely a legendary guitarist. And we need more players like Roy Clark on the scene today. He's definitely sorely missed. His sense of humor, all these quirky things he did on guitar. Great musician, for sure. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content and material. Thank you.